I worked major crimes, so I did all the homicides, robberies, sex crimes. You try to shoulder everything that you see. There's a lot that happens that first responders have to deal with. And there's cases that you have that just take a piece of your heart that you're never going to see again, and just really heartbreaking things. Everybody doesn't think that they're going to be that person who gets affected by the trauma, but eventually everybody is going to be affected by it. So I was working that day and I responded to my own son's suicide call. When my first child died, I told God, I said, God, don't send me to another dead kid call. Don't send me to another. I don't want to have to tell anybody they lost a loved one. I'm out. Don't send me to that. And those were all the calls I got, one after another, one after another. And I was just going, what are you doing, God?
Stories stir the soul.
Stories reveal.
And stories heal.
In this podcast, we will give you an inside look at someone who's had a life-changing breakthrough.
Real people, real stories with real breakthroughs. As a health and wellness expert and coach, and Todd as a men's mentor,
we've seen firsthand what God can do when it comes to a breakthrough. So lean in, listen well. This could be your biggest breakthrough.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Your Biggest Breakthrough. I'm your host, Wendy Pett.
I'm Todd Isberner, and Wendy, you're probably not as big a fan as I was back a few years ago.
About what?
Rocky Balboa.
Oh, yeah. How many times do we have to watch the Rocky movies?
Here's the crazy thing, though. Today's guest reminds me of Rocky. I almost called him Rocky. Because no matter how many times this guy got knocked down, he get right back up.
True.
And so that's why today's conversation is going to be so powerful, because we're talking about what happens when someone spends a lifetime running toward crisis and danger. It's kind of like Rocky running into the punches, but it never really deals with what's going on the inside and what it's doing to them on the inside.
Yeah, true. Well, our guest today is Sergeant Mike McGrew, and he is a highly decorated 31-year veteran of the Santa Barbara Police Department. And he has served as a major crimes homicide detective, a hostage negotiator, and as president of the Police Officers Association. And he's not just a first-generation first responder. He's a third-generation first responder. So this really wasn't just a job. It's like part of who he is.
Yeah. He's such a dude.
He's great.
He's a delight. But over those decades, Mike was exposed really to the worst of humanity. It was violent crime, loss, trauma on a regular basis. And at the same time, his personal life was taking hit after hit. Cancer, failed marriages, the loss of his youngest son, and then another son battling addiction. I'm telling you, that's a level of weight that most people couldn't imagine carrying.
True. And like so many people, especially those who are strong and used to helping others, he didn't process it.
Yeah.
He buried it. He pushed it down, tried to cope. And like many do, turned to things that only made the pain worse instead of better.
Yeah, but in everything, he continued to wonder, is there something more? And so everything changed when Mike hit a real breaking point. He had this profound encounter with God. And this was one that didn't just, change what he believed. It began to heal years of trauma that had been broken.
Yeah. And so today, he is the co-founder and executive director of 911 at Ease International. And they provide free, confidential counseling to first responders and their families. It's amazing. And he's the author of A Higher Call to Duty, where he shares his journey from trauma to healing to purpose.
Yeah. So what we love about Mike's story is simply this. It's not just about law enforcement. It's about anyone who's ever tried to carry pain alone.
Yeah.
Anyone who feels overwhelmed, anyone who needs to know that breakthrough actually is still possible.
Yes. So he's the perfect fit for your biggest breakthrough. Enjoy the show. Well, welcome, Sergeant Mike McGrew, to Your Biggest Breakthrough. It's a delight to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and for those who are watching on YouTube, you're going to love his studio.
It's awesome.
Are you in your truck or your car?
I'm in my truck.
I figured truck.
I'm in New Mexico.
I figured truck.
Yeah, he's in New Mexico.
I pegged him as a truck guy.
In an area that doesn't have great signal, but this is going to work its way through just wonderfully. And Mike has got a great story that I really believe is going to encourage you.
It's God's story.
Pay close attention and watch and see how many times you're going to relate to what Mike went through, not specifically, but in terms of internally. So, Mike, we're going to start at the beginning here. You literally have spent decades seeing a lot of things that most of us cannot even imagine. We're talking about crime scenes, violence, loss, all these emotionally traumatic things in life. So, when did you start to first realize that this isn't a job anymore? This is really starting to affect me.
When I came on to the police department, I served for 31 years, and half my career I was in patrol as an officer and a sergeant, and the other half I worked major crimes, so I did all the homicides, robberies, sex crimes, crimes against children. This really kind of the worst of the worst of, and when I came into this job, you were told, "Hey, it's a tough job, so just suck it up and do your best." And I wasn't a believer when I first started. And you try to shoulder everything that you see. There's a lot that happens that first responders have to deal with, and there's cases that you have that just take a piece of your heart that you're never going to see again, and just really heartbreaking things and traumatic things, and you get attacked a lot as well. There's a lot of violence against yourself and your partners. And so these things just build up and they build up and they build up. And everybody doesn't think that they're going to be that person who gets affected by the trauma, but eventually everybody is going to be affected by it. And I was. There was a lot of negative coping mechanisms that were out there drinking. It was just, there wasn't any place for me to put my burdens down. And a lot of the people that I worked with as well. And I went through 2 marriages, uh, and it was during my third marriage that I actually came to the Lord. I had a 12-year-old son that was diagnosed with cancer. He had bone cancer, osteosarcoma, and he lost his leg. And then we had to go through some chemotherapy that was really tough. He almost died about 6 times just because of the chemo. But God was there. I didn't know him yet. A lot of people said, why don't you come to the Lord? And there's a lot of peace in this, a lot of strength in this. And I was just saying, well, if there's a God, then how come my kid's got cancer? How come he's missing his leg? What's going on?
Yeah.
But the Lord was just super gentle with me. And the police department and the fire department, my dad retired as the fire chief of the city of Santa Barbara. And that's where I worked for, it was the city of Santa Barbara at the police department. And the police and fire departments got together and they wanted to help out. So they had a barbecue at a local fairgrounds, and they were selling chicken lunches just to help us with co-pays, and we had to drive to Los Angeles for a lot of the treatments. And the day that they had this barbecue, 1,000 people from the community showed up.
Wow.
It was amazing. And, you can't say thank you enough. You just can't do it.
How humbling.
There's no words for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was
yeah.
God. He was there, and they raised the money. And it was about halfway through my son's battle that I did come to the Lord. I was at a concert. It was
Well, hold on. We want to get to that, but we got to back it up first, Sergeant, because there's so much to get to. Because you're trying to get through your whole story in 5 minutes. We got 45 here.
Yeah.
So I want to go back actually, because I obviously there's so many pivotal moments in your God walk and just your journey, but I'm thinking about first responders, and I'm thinking about people that have experienced trauma, and I'm thinking about people, I mean, just average people that aren't first responders that deal with massive trauma, and they internalize it, they push it down, and just like you did. And so for someone listening right now, I kind of want to just ask them or ask you, like, how do you know, or how did you know, and how can maybe you tell them that when's the point where you're no longer handling it? It's actually hurting you. When was that point for you?
I think it starts to hurt you the moment you start to do that. For me, I did put compartmentalized a lot of the trauma. I pushed it down, but it also built walls, and that's kind of a form of protection that you're doing. You know, you're building walls up, and um, and it's not the place to be because it's just your heart isn't going to be able to function the way it needs to function and love people the way that you need to love people and be there for people that just and you're just shutting down basically is what happens. So
Yeah.
you go to work, you see the trauma, you see some really bad stuff, you come home, you can't even talk about it because it's so bad. You don't want to share that with your family, you don't want to
I have
share it with your
nightmares about
neighbors.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so there's really no place to talk about it. Sometimes you can talk about it at work, but once you leave work, you're on your own, and nobody's going to understand it, nor would you want them to try to understand it. Because I think as a police officer, one of my responsibilities was to have people feel safe and not to scare them with the things that I've seen, because it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
happen all the time to everybody. It
Yeah.
happens a lot to the people that serve, um, but you want to make people feel safe. So there's just a lot of things that'll shut down, and that's where
A lonely place.
yeah, that's where people get hard hearts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you stay so focused on on the mission, and you don't put any focus onto what's happening on the inside of you. And so I think that's true not just for first responders, but for people who just go through stuff that they don't know how to
Mhm.
handle.
Mhm.
And it seems that a lot of times we try to numb our pain by going somewhere else just to try to ease the pain, like alcohol. In
As
your
you
case,
did. Yeah.
you went to alcohol. And so why do you think it's so easy for us to turn to those things instead of just to turn to people and ask for help?
Or the Lord.
Well, not knowing the Lord at that time, I didn't know. I didn't have
Sure.
the spirit to discern, and
Yeah.
and um, I had people that were praying for me. I'm so grateful for them because they just prayed for me all the time, and they didn't give up. And they could have given up, and
Mm,
they did
It's a good
not give
word
up
right
on
there.
me. And I
good.
go back and I thank them to this very day. I say, thank you for not giving up. Thank you for praying for me. Thank you for
Uh,
because they wanted me to know. And I when you don't know the Lord, it's hard, and you want to shoulder things that you are not going to be able to shoulder, and that's what I was trying to do. And then you're trying to deal with things that are so difficult that you just get to a point where you just want to numb yourself, like you said, and you're not dealing with things. And so, yeah, alcohol was a form of that for me. And I just come home and just kind of check out and have a drink and really not talk about things and just wait till the next day. And it's really not a life that's it's not good. It
It's
but you
not
wasn't
didn't
good.
know
good.
the whole time that even while you're going through all of that, trying to fix things on your own in a different way, God had his eye on you, and and he had his number. He had your number, and he was, what sometimes people refer to the Holy Spirit as the hound of heaven who, hunts you down. That's what he's doing in your case.
Yeah, so let's get there. Let's talk about that concert that you were sharing with us a minute ago, where you had that moment with the Lord, and just walk us through it.
Yeah, I was in a dark place. I was in a place where I'd lost some marriages. I had a child that was dealing with a life-threatening disease. I had another son that got involved in drugs at the same time, and and so I went to a concert. I didn't know what it was. I went with my wife, and it was our first date, and it was a Chris Tomlin concert. And so I
Oh.
was at this concert at the County Bowl in Santa Barbara, and Louis Giglio came out and he spoke, and he had my number.
Yeah.
He said, "Is there anybody out there who?" And he just went down my checklist, who was just feeling lonely, like things were out of control, just in a dark place, and just really, he described my life at that time, and I was so struck by that. I was just thinking, how does this man know? He's speaking to me, and there was
Yeah.
5,000 people in that crowd, and I was looking
Uh,
around, going, how does he know my story? And um, so I was hit hard by the Holy Spirit. And the next day, my cousin Dan McGrew, he works at the police department. We have a lot of cops and firefighters in our family, and he was raised a Christian, and he was one of the guys that was praying for me. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, Dan, would you talk to me about Jesus? You know, I want to know more." And it was that day that the seed was planted, the mustard seed was planted. And from that day on, it just began to grow and grow, my love for God, and just that fire that I had, that desire that I had. And and it really changed my life. It transformed my life. And it also transformed my job as well. And
Mm.
I
In
just
what way?
found, yeah, I found a lot of peace. I found a lot of strength. I found a lot of comfort. I found all the things God has to offer. And I needed that, you know, at that point in my
Yeah.
life. And it was, and I still do.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. But God started to change things at work as well. And I knew that it was no longer about going to 9/11 calls. It was God was putting me in places that I needed to be to help other people
That's amazing.
Wow.
receive
Amazing.
their help too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you, received the Holy Spirit and had that moment at the concert, at the Chris Tomlin concert, what was you reached out to your brother or brother-in-law, brother?
Yeah, my cousin.
Your cousin. You reached out to your cousin, but then after that, were you hungry? Like, did you jump right into the Bible? Were you looking at all kinds of YouTube videos? Like, what was the hunger and how did you
I did.
feed?
And for me it was the
Yeah,
word. I jumped into the Bible a lot.
good.
And it just spoke
Good.
to me. It just became lifelike, you know, and it is
Yeah.
lifelike. It's the living word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
the
in that
Bible just
moment,
yeah, and
yeah.
I just needed more and I needed more. And then you know, I was in the first home group that I was in. There's a pastor that was discipling me, and I was in his home group, and we were studying the book of Joshua, and that's when my first son died. Um, my youngest son, the one that had been battling cancer. The cancer had come back 3 times. It hit his lung, which is fatal, and then it hit his other leg. And they tried to. They didn't want to make him a double amputee, but they tried to do a bone sparing operation that didn't hold, and you know it was just really tough times. And when he was 18, the way it ended was that he committed suicide. Um,
You just couldn't
So
handle
sorry.
it. So
so I
sorry.
was working that day, and it happened in the city, and so I responded to my own son's suicide call,
Oh.
Oh my
and
gosh.
you know it was God was so gentle. I have to tell you, it was he. When I look back on everything that happened, he was so gentle to me, and he gave me every single thing that I needed. And you know, there was a lot of officers that showed up at the scene. You know, I looked down the driveway of this place, and it was just a sea of blue. You know, and nobody has a word. You know, you really don't have words for people when you go through that. But there's that ministry of presence that happens,
Presence.
and that's what happened. You know, is this I just really valued the fact that they were there for me, and then
You know,
God brought
Mike,
the right people in to speak to me. There's a couple
yeah.
supernatural miracles that happened, you know, right after my child's death. That you know, I knew where my boy was.
Do you want to share those supernatural miracles?
Yeah, you know, miracles come in they're very personal a lot of times. You know, there's something that hit you, but it's
Yeah.
got God's signature all over it. But there was
Yeah.
just one of the miracles was there was a lady that was my son's therapist, and she came to the house, and my son was in a bedroom, and he was on the floor, and she asked me if she could go in and see him and say goodbye, and I said sure. So so she went in and closed the door, and she was not a believer, but she went in and closed the door. And she came out and she was white as a sheet. She was just white and she was trembling. and she was looking at me, and she was holding on to my arm, and she said, "Mike, TT," and that was my son's nickname was TT. Is But she said TT's with God, TT's with God, and I'm like okay, and I didn't, and just thought I didn't know what had happened. So it was about 3 days later that she called me up, and she said, "I need to tell you what happened in that room." And um, she said, I'm not a believer, and not, I don't go to church, never have. And, I walked into that room, and I was sitting down, and I was sitting on the floor, and I was holding TT's hand. And then something grabbed my other hand, grabbed my right arm, and then it made the sign of the cross on me. And she said it was like something grabbed my hand and then did that and made the sign of the cross.
Wow.
And, so had she told me that day, it would have been like, but the fact that I saw the reaction she had when she came
Sure.
out of that room, I knew that she was struck, and then for her to tell me what had happened, it just made complete sense. So there was miracles like that, and it's just, God was just letting me know, hey, your boy's okay. He's with me. And,
Mm,
Sweet. He's so
beautiful.
and
gracious.
Wow.
yeah, yeah, so it
That's
was, God's good.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just look back and I just go, wow, what an amazing God through the toughest thing you could ever experience, and there is that grief that's there, but his promises are there, he comforted me, you know,
So,
when I was
beautiful.
so Mike,
grieving.
you're a real man's man. I mean, you got
I
that
was gonna say
manliness
that
about you.
earlier. That's why I said I know he's got a truck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But as men especially, and this is not to exclude women because you've got the same challenges ahead of you. But we have a tendency to want to handle these things on our own. Like we got a lot of pride, a lot of ego. We kind of say to ourselves, "Well, I should be man enough to be able to handle this on my own." But you came to that point where you realized you couldn't handle things on your own anymore, so you allowed God to enter into your life, and you can just hear the profound difference that it made. You're still every
The
bit as much of a
surrender.
man. You take responsibility. You protect and you serve, but you have this secret weapon, if you will. You have this relationship with God that seems to carry you along in ways that are really
Profound.
profound. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so what for the person out there saying, well, I wish I were there. I mean, I believe in God, but I don't seem to be able to rely on him or depend on him or believe in him like I'm hearing Mike does. How can you help them?
One of the things that I prayed for a lot was the gift of faith, and it's in 1 Corinthians 14. It's one of the gifts that God gives you. Faith is not something that we just do, that we just can come up with. It's something that God gives us, and so I prayed for it all the time, and in all of my prayers, and I still do. That God would give me more faith in Him, more trust in Him, and He answered those prayers, and that's where, as the faith grew, and faith comes when we get stretched, a lot, go through some difficult times, and I've been through a lot, and 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 just having that faith and just asking God, or just even talking to God about, hey, I want to believe more, and it's in
Yeah.
scripture,
Help
I
my
believe, but
unbelief,
help me
right?
with my unbelief,
Yeah.
and God will meet you there, he just does.
Yeah,
It's his promise,
I
it
love
really
that,
is.
Mike.
If
That's
we ask
that.
for, if we ask for bread, he's not going to give us a stone, he's going to give
Yeah,
us more faith.
you
It's
know what we
good.
love about that is that like it's so much more simple than we realize. Like we were thinking, well, maybe Mike will give us like the 7 steps to, but it's just like, well, just ask God,
Yeah.
ask Him to give you more faith, and then begin to watch and see what happens.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
you have gone through surviving all of this and more that you probably haven't shared with us because it's probably overwhelming. But now you are helping others through the 911 at ease. And I want to talk a little bit about that because when did you realize that your pain could actually have a purpose to help others in the same kind of crisis and need?
It was after my first son's death. Um, I reached out You know, well, let me back up. When I became a believer and God just met me where I needed to be met in every area of my life, I wanted that for every first responder that was out there,
Yes.
all the cops, all the firefighters, the emergency medical people, that the people that I worked with, because I knew that they were suffering the same, they were seeing the same thing I was. They had the same, they were carrying the same pain I was. And I was just, that was my prayer. I'm like, I just want them to have this.
Yeah.
And so as I prayed, one of the things that happened out of TT's death was I did reach out to get a counselor, and it was a grief counselor. And,
It's wise.
um, it was somebody that was good with grief, but I wasn't just a grieving father. I was
Mm.
a cop at that time that had 20 years at that point of really dark stuff, things that I hadn't unloaded on anybody. And so I don't know that every counselor's set up to hear that, or to be able to deal with, or to be able to deal with um, the trauma part of that. And so I knew that I needed somebody that could deal with the issues that I was having. And I didn't find that person right away, but it made me think. We have a lot of folks that are out there um, that are really suffering, and there was no access for cops or firefighters or emergency medical people to get any kind of help, because it could cost you your job.
Mm.
If you said, "Hey, boss, taking that dead baby out of mom's arms really messed me up yesterday," then your boss
Yep.
could say, "Hey, that's
Yeah.
nice, Mike. Give me your badge, give me your gun, go sit over there, and we'll see if you're
Yep.
fit for duty." And
Kind of
so
like in the
nobody did.
military,
Nobody
same
reached
thing.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it just, and if you went to insurance, then you'd have something on a negative medical diagnosis on your insurance, and
Mm.
if you want to go to another agency, that's going to be on your record. And so there was just a lot of disincentives for people to get help. So as I was praying about it, I prayed with the guy. He was a philanthropist, Michael Hammer, and I was just talking to him about it. And I'm just like, hey, we got to change this. And so out of prayer came the At Ease program. And we set up a nonprofit where first responders could call a number that wasn't associated with the city or the county.
Or
And
anonymous.
it was absolutely anonymous. So as soon as they call a number, they become a number. I don't even know who's in the program or who's used it. A lot of people have come and thanked me later,
Mm.
we just, started that. And one of my prayers was that people would start to talk about, just the trauma, just the issues, the things that we had to go through, and not just stow it away. Let's get it out on the table. Let's talk about it. And, it helps, fellowship helps when you're going through a
Yeah.
tough time because you think you're alone. And that's what happens. I think the devil tries to isolate us and just make
Yep.
us think that we're alone. But God gave us each other, to get through things.
Well,
And
Mike, I
Mm.
just want to say, way to go
So yeah, seriously. Yeah.
being obedient to this call because, putting together a nonprofit and, not wasting your pain in
Yeah.
order to help others is to be commended
Mm.
because other people just like you needed and still do need a safe place where they can unpack this and really get the healing that they deserve and desire. So I just think it's beautiful. I
Yeah, and
really
it
do.
reminds me of what's shared in First Corinthians and how God has allowed us opportunity to share comfort with others with the same comfort we ourselves have received from Him. And that's exactly what you're doing, especially through your organization. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And so the website directly is, I'll put it in the show notes as well, but go ahead and share it here.
it's 911aei.org, O-R-G. And
Perfect.
that's for 911. Addie's International is the name of the organization. Once we started it at the police department where I was in Santa Barbara, it just caught on really quick. And then before I knew it, it went countywide and then tri-countywide. And then we had a national demand for it. And so we've served over 13,000 first responders and their family members as well to
It's
date. And,
incredible.
Yeah.
because we help the family, there's a secondary trauma that comes home with
Yes.
them. But, what's really interesting is that, and I don't know how it works, God does, but a lot of people come to the Lord through this program.
Yeah.
Even though
Praise
there's
God.
secular counseling that's out there, I think,
Yeah.
I've been able to talk to a lot of people because they ask me, they said, well, what happened? Why'd you do this? Or how'd you get through what you got through? And, and your testimony, really helps a lot of people. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's been very rewarding. And then God, he threw another, um, he threw something else into it. And we started a thing called 9/11 Project Harmony. And this is like blowing my socks off because um, God's hand is on this program. And it's where we put first responders with songwriters. And the first responders tell their story to the songwriters, and the songwriters create a song from their story. So they're giving their
Wow.
testimony. Yeah, they're giving their
That's
testimony. And then
awesome.
out of their testimony comes a song. And
Oh,
these
I
songs are
love
so
that.
powerful. And I have
Wow.
to tell you that, we've done it at retreats, we've done it on one-on-ones, with people that have been through some tough stuff. And the Holy Spirit just comes down every time, anoints the songwriters. A lot of them are worship songwriters. Some of them are not. Some of them are not believers. But the songs are amazing, and God is like, He's using it to touch other people. It's another ministry because we're putting these songs out, and we've gotten a lot of people that in the entertainment industry that God brought in, and he's bringing them all together. So it's really an exciting program that we're working on, along with the
Mike, I love
counseling
it.
part of what we're doing.
And
So good.
can they find that over on a 911 AEI,
Yeah,
AEI.org?
yeah. It's all on our
Okay. I
website.
just want to
On
make
our
sure.
website, we have the counseling.
I'm just thinking to myself, Mike, you're not even going to know this side of heaven,
No.
what the impact. I mean, just
Yeah, it's
wow.
just
And your
thank you
son
for being
is
obedient. Mm,
just cheering you on. Like I can just see,
mhm.
oh, your precious son, just like so proud of his
Yeah,
dad.
you're a rare
Ah,
bird, dude. You're a rare bird. And
yeah, we're grateful.
if you
We're
look
grateful.
back to your younger self, I'm sure you're shaking your head thinking about, there's no way I could have envisioned myself in this place today. But
No,
you've proven faithful, and
Yeah,
you've proven,
with the little, so he's giving you much.
yeah, and you've been persistent in pursuing God, which I think is a real encouragement and an
Yeah,
inspiration, because a lot of times it's easy to give up quick, or it's easy to get bitter because of life circumstances, and to just sort of just shake it all off. And in your case, you're showing us that if you do turn to God and you sincerely seek Him, He will come through. He's got plans and purposes to fulfill in spite of all the craziness that we've been through. So when it's all said and done, Mike, what do you hope your life and your story, what sort of a legacy do you hope that'll have? How that can help people
I
discover
just, every
more?
day I just pray about serving God in His kingdom, and just that this program, the Out of Use program, it's a ministry for me, and that it would touch just a lot of people. It would heal hearts. It would strengthen communities. It would bring compassion, because when you have first responders that are doing well, they're showing up and they're doing well for the people that they're serving. They're not
yeah,
thinking about
for
their
sure.
divorce or their next drink or something. They're thinking about what they have in front of them, what they really have to deal with. And I really would like to, my prayer is that people just know God's healing. They see His power in all of it, and they really are. It's God's story, I mean, He used the guy. I mean, God uses the simple to confound the wise, and He picked the right guy in this one, because there's no way, there's just no way that I could run. People look at me and they're going, "You're doing what?" And we're dealing with all these entertainment people, or the
God's
counseling,
doing
whatever it
it.
is, and I'm like, I can only say, hey, it's God, and
Yeah,
That's right.
and give
He
Him the
gets the
glory,
glory. Wow.
every
Yeah,
step of the way, and that's what I did a
so good.
lot. I actually, when I was when I lost my first son, I lost two kids. So my older son died as well later on.
From the
Hmm.
addiction?
Yeah, he had an addiction, and he was sober
Oh,
for about a year. I ended up adopting his daughter.
Ugh.
Anyways, she said that, hey, my
wow.
dad's over in Vegas, and so I called him up. said, what are you doing there? Not the place for sobriety. He didn't have the answers, so I knew something was up. So I told him I loved him, like I always do. I never get off the phone without telling people that I love them, because you never know. And the next day they found him dead in his hotel room. Heroin fentanyl overdose is what happened.
Oh, Mike.
Yeah. And, but again, God just met me right there. And my son knew the Lord. When he was sober, he was on fire for the Lord, but, devil was just right on his heels the whole time too. But, there's a lot of good things that have come out of both of those horrible incidents that would knock you down. I mean, there's no way that you can stand after something like that. And when my first child died, I told God, I said, God, don't send me to another dead kid call. Don't send me to another. I don't want to have to tell anybody they lost a loved one. I'm out. Don't send me to that. And those were all the calls I got, one after another, one after another. And I was just going, what are you doing, God? But I realized that I was standing on the doorstep of these folks that I knew they knew their pain, and they knew that I knew it. They could see my heart was broken wide open, and they would look at me and they would say, "How did you survive this? After the loss of a child or a loved one?" And my only answer was that it was God. God was the only thing that got me through it. And, every single one of those calls ended up in prayer, whether the person was a believer or not. God's presence was right there. So I knew what he was doing. And I
Yeah.
knew how, and then I saw other families that had addiction in their family, and for me, I would share my story. Because they felt alone, or they felt like something was wrong with them, as a parent or whatever. And I'd say,
Sure.
no, there's nothing wrong. I'm going through the same thing, and this is how I'm getting through it. And I couldn't have survived I would not be here if it wasn't for
Yeah.
God, for him holding me
Yeah.
up, and
Yeah.
Well, it's
just
just
his
such a
love.
reminder, Mike, that we should always be willing to share our story with others
hmm
and to be humble because we can comfort those that are going through something similar. And God trusted you and knew
Yeah.
that you would. And so you are just such an inspiration. You really are. Like I just want to cry. You're just such an inspiration. And you've been through so much, but like you said, God is so good. And he's even called you to write a book called A Higher Call to Duty, right? And so tell us a little bit about the book, and we want to be able to get people to that book. So let
Yeah,
us know
it's
about that as well.
the book was about it was a chapter of my life, because since that time, a lot of things have happened.
Mm.
The
So
book
you need
talks
to
about.
write a sequel, next sequel.
Yeah, I
Yes.
know. I could probably write 3 more sequels, I think, but
Mm.
but, I at that time, I was battling cancer, and then,
Oh my gosh.
and I still am. It's come back, 5 times. It's stage 4, colon cancer, and, but God is, like, amazing, I mean, I'm here. The
Yes.
first time I walked into the
Yes.
doctor's office, the first doctor said, "Well, you're gonna be dead in 3 years," and I said,
Mm-mm.
"Well, no, I'm not, and, you're fired."
Good for you, Mike.
And guess what? God's gonna heal me. And so I still walk in that healing, even though I've been hit,
Yes.
over and over, because that's what the devil wants to do. He wants to hit you and say, "Oh no,
Yeah.
you're gonna," and he wants
Yeah.
to discourage you. But
Yeah.
it's in, the Bible tells us in Hebrews that, stand firm in the confession of our hope, because he who promises faithful. So I just stand in that healing. If somebody says, "Hey,
That's
how's your
right.
cancer?" I go, "Well, it's not my cancer," and I'm healed. I'm going to be fine. So I'm in a
The
trial.
power
They
of
actually,
the
yeah, and they're
words.
and
Yeah.
they're shrinking the the cancer and everything. So things are going good. But also in the
Praise
book, I
God.
talk a lot about, I talk about my first son's death. I talk about a lot of supernatural things that happened to me, because there was a point where the Holy Spirit just began to work in my life. I mean, and it was on. And my head was spinning because I didn't know, I was praying for the gift of prophecy because, Bible tells us that gift is used to edify the church, build it up, exhort the church, point to God and to comfort man. And that's what I was doing out on the street. And I noticed that I was really, I was on fire for that. I'm like, God, just, I just want to do this, and I just thought it was at that level where I was just going to, show up and just be able to comfort people. And then the next thing I knew, the gift of prophecy started happening to me. And I was just like, what's going on here? I talked to my buddy who was a pastor, and he says, well, haven't you been praying for it? And I said, yeah, I guess I have. So the Lord just started changing my prayers for people, and he just started speaking to me, and then he had me on some calls where um there was one call in particular where I ended up casting a demon out of a guy. And he kind of prepared me for that, but I was with another believer, another sergeant, and it was a homeless guy, and he was not looking good when we showed up, and it was just a call of a transient down. And normally we wouldn't have even gone on that call, me and this other sergeant, but at that time, that night, we had a guy with a gun, that was uh, he was he was held up in a hotel and causing a big scene. So most of the cops were up there, and we just went out and said, well, we'll handle the lower end calls. And so we did. And it pulled up, and this guy was laying on the grass of this business. And I walked up to him and I said, hey, buddy, it's time to go. You got to get up. The business called. And he was just looking at me, and he goes, yeah, yeah. But he didn't look good. He looked really Ashton, and he looked, it just, something wrong. So I walked around the back of him, and he had blood on his pants. He had like a GI bleed that was happening. So I just told him, I said, hey, but just relax. Don't worry about it. I'm going to get you an ambulance. So called for an ambulance, and I was just waiting. We were waiting for the ambulance, and I started talking to him. We started talking about God. I don't know how the conversation happened, but we ended up talking about, we were talking about the Lord. And he said, yeah, I knew God, but I ended up walking away from him. And I said, okay, well, I said, would it be okay if I prayed for you? And he said, sure. So so I put hands on this guy, and my partner was like, he's kind of a clean freak, and the guy was, he's a transient, so he was putting his gloves on. He put his hand on my shoulder, and I was praying over this guy, and the next thing I know, a demon manifests, and this thing started coming up, and this guy could not get up on his own strength. There was no way. And this thing raised him up off the ground, didn't levitate him, but it raised him up off the ground. The next thing I know, this thing, it was there, and it was nasty, and so it's just like, well, in Jesus' name, you're coming out of this guy. And so we ended up casting this demon out of this guy, and it came out, and you could see it, and
Yeah.
and then he fell back down to the ground, and then his whole countenance changed, and he was just like looking at me, and he was like staring through me, and he's just praying and thanking God, and then and that while that was happening, the smell of death came up too. It was really unusual. There's nothing like that smell. And when the ambulance got there, they'd smelled it, and they said, "What died?" And I said, "It's a long story." But load this guy up and take him to the hospital. And so afterwards, I got in the car with my partner, and I said, "You saw that, right?" And he's like, "Yep, I saw all of it." And he said, "And we're going to pray for each other right now." So he did a prayer of protection for us, and then later on, God brought me into to a deliverance ministry, and it was not that that dramatic, so it's a very loving ministry. There's inner healing that happened, and then you get rid of the enemy. A
Beautiful.
lot of Christians, are
You know,
struggling with strongholds in our lives.
And you're walking things out
Yeah.
with great authority,
Yeah.
which
But
is the way we're
but
to
your
do it.
whole life just screams breakthrough.
Yeah.
breakthrough. Because every one of us have got areas of our lives where we can feel imprisoned or trapped or stuck. But the beauty is that that nothing can stop the Spirit of God from freeing us. And just to go back to what you shared earlier, the simple thing is we just ask God for the faith, and then we walk in the direction of what He's called us. And your life just speaks so highly of that. And so thank you for being obedient to the Lord. Thank you for being an example.
Yes.
And thanks for taking time today in your truck, in the woods, to share your story.
Yes. I know that this is going to impact so many people. So bless you. And we are believing with you for full healing.
Yeah.
In
Thank you
Jesus'
so
name.
much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
thank you for all that
Yeah.
you do and for your ministry and for touching all the people that you touch is super.
Thank you. All right. God bless. Take care.
God bless you.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, we love spending time with you right here on Your Biggest Breakthrough podcast. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. But until then, just head on over to yourbiggestbreakthrough.com where you'll find some free resources and information and a place where you can comment, and we would love to dialogue with you there. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.